Yo, what up? Okay, welcome. Here are this week's learning activities for Mr. Paisley's classes. This is for the week of April 27th to May 1st, that full week. Like last week, please submit all 4 of these activities on one Google Doc, which is attached. The Google Doc that is attached looks like this. All right, so you're going to see there are several assignments in here, and you're going to do them all on one Google Doc. Just write onto this document, and then you're going to submit this when you're finished everything at once. Now, this is attached to the Google Classroom. When you open it, it's in a Word program, and last week some students said that they're having trouble opening it. You can't write on it in a Word program, but when you open it, if you go to the top and you click on the 3 little dots that you'll see, it says Convert to a Google Doc. You convert it to a Google Doc, then you can open it as a Google Doc. It takes one click, and then you can write on that, and then that's what you're going to submit to me as your assignment. Okay? Starting on May 4th, all assignments will count as a normal grade. It's no longer going to be enrichment learning for extra credit. It's going to count as a normal grade starting on May 4th. Please get in the habit of completing them and checking in on Google Classroom regularly, meaning daily. The school district has set up a system where students need to check in through their student portal every day. And when you check in, you actually get points and credit that count towards attendance, and I'll show you very quickly. There's a whole new menu on our gradebook that's called COVID-19 Attendance. We've already started it this week. The students who are checking in through their student portal are getting a 1, which means they're getting a point for the day. And checking in gives you a point, and then if you check in and complete the work, I convert it to a T, which means you turned your work in, and this is more points. So that's how that's set up. So make sure you are going into your student portal, logging in every day so you can be getting your attendance credit. So this week, Mr. Paisley's classes, okay, which this week is going to include English 2 and drama. This week you will be reading a short story by Ray Bradbury called The Pedestrian, which comes right out of our textbook. It deals with a future society that relies solely on technology to survive. The story is particularly important given today's situation with coronavirus and how our country and the world are turning to more and more digital experiences. So because we are all locked down, for the most part, the only way we can communicate is digitally through technology, through the internet, and this story deals with some of these themes and how technology can go too far and all of a sudden human interaction is no longer possible. Actually, it's no longer encouraged, which is in a way like it's today. Human interaction for the moment is being discouraged with social distancing. So the story is kind of interesting because although now we need this to help stop the spread of the virus, if it continues and develops in other ways, human interaction is replaced with technology, obviously there could be some issues with that. All right, so before you read the story, there's a very helpful slide introduction that can be found right here on this link. Now, this is going to be attached to your Google Classroom. So I'm going to pull up the link that that's going to bring you to. All right, so that link looks something like this. So you're going to pull this up in the beginning, and this is going to give you a good introduction to The Pedestrian by Ray Bradbury. All right, so first introducing the story, The Pedestrian by Ray Bradbury. There's a little picture, okay? Technology, the knack of so arranging the world that we don't have to experience it. All right, that's a definition. That's a traditional definition. So the pedestrian is a chilling portrayal of a society in which people are so isolated in their homes that a lone pedestrian is seen as a threat to the social order. Okay, and it's very interesting today because, again, we need the social distance, but there are people who have actually gone outside of their houses. It's been on the news, and because certain governors have different laws in states, there have been people who have been arrested for going to a playground. There was a woman and her small child who went to a playground and were on the swings, and they were asked to leave. A police officer came up and they didn't leave. They were arrested. They were cited. They were given a ticket. So it's kind of interesting the things that are happening. There were other situations where people wanted to go to church on Easter, and they actually did it in a safe way. They stayed in their cars. They met in a parking lot. They stayed inside their cars with their windows up, and they were social distancing. And the preacher was giving the sermon, I believe through, I'm not exactly sure how he or she was doing it, but the people were in their cars, and they were all ticketed by police, which ended up the Department of Justice got involved and revoked the tickets. So this is an issue. There's a fine line between being safe and having a society that's too isolated with technology. All right, so we're going to look at some things like setting and mood, specifically setting. Setting establishes the time and place in the story. So the time is an evening in the future in November of 2053. And the place the city isn't given, but it's a silent city. It could be any city. It could be Philadelphia. All right. So when you're talking about setting and mood, the setting can create a mood or an atmosphere, a subtle emotional overtone that can strongly affect our feelings. What mood does the setting create? Okay, on a dark, cold night in November of 2053, the pedestrian Leonard Mead walks alone through the city. The streets and freeways are deserted. Dark, tomb-like homes line the streets. You can see the mood that's being created here. It's a depressing, dark mood. And again, it's interesting with today's things that are happening with today and the questions we should ask and the caution we should take with this, because we want to be safe, but we also want to find a balance so that we do not develop certain things that could become problematic in the future. All right, so this is just a brief introduction. You guys are going to have different instructions. You are going to have to look at the author's purpose, which is the final assignment of this, which I'm going to explain in a moment. So when you finish the story, you're going to pause to consider the purpose of the writer. All right, and you're going to try and figure out and write in a five paragraph essay what was Ray Bradbury's purpose. Okay, here is actually a little hint to his purpose, which I'm not going to get into too much because I want you guys to try and think of that purpose yourself. Okay, so that was a helpful introduction that you can look at on your own. You can click on this link and it'll give you an introduction. The next thing that's helpful is you need to obviously be able to read the story. A text version of The Pedestrian is found on this link, which will bring you to this part of the story. Now, the story is pretty small with the print. You can hopefully your computer can let you enlarge it. It's not a very long story. It was written in 1951, so here's the story, which you're going to use that link to answer. It's not very long, okay? All right, so that's the text, and then I gave you guys a link, which is a YouTube link where I'm not going to click on it because my web browser is not going to work with this, but you can click on this YouTube link, and it's going to bring you to a YouTube audio version of the story, which you can actually play. Okay, it's a pretty cool audio version, and it gives you an audio with some sound effects of the story. Okay, there's some ads that pop up, but what I suggest that you do is I suggest you read along with the story as you listen to the audio. All right, so here are the four assignments that you're going to do with this. This is all in Google Classroom. Assignment number 1, first you're going to do the vocabulary for the pedestrian. You're going to use a dictionary or the internet to define the words listed in the section. Again, here is the document. You can see vocabulary. Here are the vocabulary words you're going to look up for that. Okay, the next assignment is the literary terms. In this section, you will define the literary terms provided, such as simile, metaphor, imagery, irony, and setting, and you can find the examples of these as you read the story. So here is what this looks like in assignment number 2, the literary terms. So you're going to define simile, and as you read the story, you're going to give an example of a simile in the story, and there are similes. You're going to define metaphor, give an example of a metaphor that you find in the story. Define setting, which we just talked about. What is the setting of the story? I kind of gave you guys that in the introduction. What is imagery? Define imagery. Give an example of some powerful imagery in the story. What is verbal irony? Okay, you're going to give an example of verbal irony in the story. What is situational irony? Give an example of situational irony in the story. What is theme? Explain the theme of the story. So that's all in part 2, the literary terms. All right, assignment number 3 is the discussion questions. In this section, you're going to use RACE. Now, we talked about ACE, but I actually like RACE better because RACE is kind of giving you that restating of the question. So RACE stands for restate the question, answer it, cite evidence, explain the evidence. To answer these questions, here are the questions. Okay, there are, let me see how many questions I have for you guys. I think I have 18 questions. You're going to answer these as you read, but you're not just going to give a little fragment or a one-word answer. You're going to use RACE. Restate the question, answer it, cite some evidence, and explain. You can paraphrase or you can quote. There's not a lot of room here, but again, when you open this in a Google Doc, you can type right into this and it'll give you more room because it's a Word program in a Google Doc. All right. Finally, assignment number 4. Author's purpose. In this section, you will answer the following question in a 5-paragraph essay. What was Ray Bradbury's purpose for writing The Pedestrian, and why might his purpose be important today? I kind of touched on that. Use quotes from the story to support your answer. Remember, please answer all 4 of these assignments in the one Google Doc attached and submitted through Google Classroom by Friday, May 1st at midnight. So here again is the Google Doc. Here is the question for the constructed response. Actually, it's not. It's more than a constructed response this week. It's going to be a 5-paragraph essay. You're going to answer this right here on this document, begin writing, and then save and then submit it through Google Classroom. Okay? Now, I want to give you guys a real quick lesson on some points here that it's just a quick refresher. Let's talk about simile and metaphor. This is middle school stuff. Simile, a comparison between two things using the words like, as, or then. Metaphor, a comparison between two things not using the words like, as, or then. Next thing is setting. We talked about this in the introduction. The setting of a story is the time and place and can be general or specific. Imagery. Imagery is language that appeals to our 5 senses and creates images in our minds, things we can see, hear, taste, touch, and smell. Remember, imagery is not just visual images that we can see. Imagery involves the 5 senses. It's sensory language that heightens the story. It makes it more powerful, and it makes us be able to see, hear, taste, touch, and smell it. Okay? A review of irony. We talked all about irony when we did our unit on Lamb to the Slaughter. We talked all about irony when we studied Othello, and in drama class we did irony when we studied the Titanic and when we studied The Taming of the Shrew. So, verbal irony. It's when you say the opposite of what you mean. It's sarcasm. Situational irony. When the exact opposite happens of what we'd expect. If a fire station burns down, that's situational irony. And then dramatic irony. It's when the audience or the reader knows something the character in the story does not. For example, in Romeo and Juliet, we know that Juliet is not really dead. She just took a sleeping potion. And then finally, author's purpose, the acronym PIE. P-I-E, persuade, to convince readers to believe a point of view or influence their opinion on a subject. That would be to persuade. If the author's purpose was to inform, to provide information to readers about a certain topic or subject, or to entertain, to stimulate readers and provide a pleasurable experience. All right? So, that pretty much wraps this up. All right? So remember, you guys are going to read Ray Bradbury's The Pedestrian. There's a link to the text. There's a link to the audio. You're going to do the definitions. You're going to do the literary terms and examples. You're going to answer the discussion questions using RACE. And then you're going to figure out the author's purpose in a 5-paragraph essay using evidence. You're going to submit it all on the one Google Doc. It is due Friday, May 1st at midnight. And again, if you guys need help, have questions, my office hours are there. The quickest and best way is through Google Classroom. I'll immediately respond. I've talked to many students over the last couple of weeks who've used Google Classroom. I get back to you guys pretty quick within a few minutes because I'm constantly checking my emails. I'm there at my office hours. And we've had some good conversations. A couple times we've had some back and forth. Students have asked for some things to be explained, and I'm ready to do that. All right, so good luck. And remember, turn it in by Friday at midnight.